Hello, my name is Nisha Feik, and to begin with today, before we start our session, I'd like to perform an acknowledgement of country, which is something that us Australian people do to acknowledge our traditional people that are on this land. In the spirit of reconciliation, Cultural Infusion acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So this session is all about discovery learning for intercultural understanding. I'll be sharing some different lesson plans with you that I'm very happy to email you afterwards if you would like a copy. I will be also doing a bit of a blended learning idea where I go from the traditional methods that we discuss in the lesson plans to using some music technology, and that technology will be Sound Infusion, which I'll do a quick tour of. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of today's session. I've tried to pack as much in there as I can that might be of use in the classroom. Before I start to explain about Cultural Infusion, which is the company that I work at, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit more. So I've been working as a performing arts teacher in schools for over 30 years. And most of that time I've been teaching primary and secondary students, although some of the time I also taught kindergarten and university student teachers. I became very passionate about this area of music education when I was running my own company, World Beat Learning, 20 years ago. And that company was all about developing resources that could be used in the classroom easily with authentic recordings. I've always been a big fan of using quality musical recordings of music that everyone listens to, not necessarily children's music when I'm teaching, because I think there are always ways to simplify involvement and performing of pieces of music, be it Mozart or be it Ladysmith Black Mambazo. There are always elements of the music that you can bring out and explain and examine and perform with the students. So that's always been my passion, well, has been for quite some time. I also went back to teaching. So I was teaching last year in a school, for example, but this year I'm full-time at Cultural Infusion, which brings us to this company. It's a wonderful company. Our vision is a world that is culturally harmonious, and our mission is building harmony through intercultural measurement and action. So there are quite a few different arms to the company. The main ones that I'm involved in are the educational experiences and Sound Infusion. So the educational experiences that we share with students and teachers all around Australia are in the form of incursions by our presenters that we have helped to promote their programs, basically. So we have everything from Bollywood dancing to Italian singing to Italian and French theatre to Indigenous Australian caring for country workshops, all sorts of wonderful cultural experiences that over 6 million students over the years have experienced in Australia, and that's quite an achievement, and it's a very wonderful thing to think about all of those children finding out about different cultures and just getting excited about what's out there in the world. It's amazing. So the other thing that, as well as helping with that aspect and lesson plans and training for teachers around those incursions, I also help to develop and promote Sound Infusion, which is I call it ethnomusicology through technology. It has won awards. It's a virtual studio of culturally diverse music from around the world, also with an interactive map and lots of lesson plans. So I'll be showing you a bit more about that later. Cultural Infusion has a not-for-profit foundation, which is a philanthropic art support to deliver programs for the disadvantaged. So that's pretty good too. So there's lots of things that Cultural Infusion does. So when it says our mission is building harmony through intercultural measurement and action, Diversity Atlas, the one I haven't talked about yet, is really what that's referring to with the intercultural measurement. That is a platform which is a data collection tool that a lot of companies around the world are beginning to use to culturally map their workforce, so that they can have a better understanding of how to meet the needs of the people that are working for them, as well as harness the special skills that those people have to go out and share those with their customers or their community, which it's a wonderful thing. And Diversity Atlas has more data collected than the Australian census, to give you an idea of the scope of it. So the same person developed Diversity Atlas as Sound Infusion, and that is a wonderful man I work with called Reza Moyeni. He's a bit of a genius. That's pretty amazing to work with these people. So today's objectives are to discuss multicultural and intercultural understanding in education, to showcase Sound Infusion, to share a traditional Chinese song with you, and on October the 17th, in my pedagogical session, I will be showing you a little bit more about how the instruments in Sound Infusion could be used to make a Chinese piece of music. I already have a Brazilian piece of music saved very simply, but I'll be showing you how that was put together and the pedagogy behind it in my next session. But today we'll look at the capoeira. I'll be linking all of our activities today to a UNESCO and American curriculum. And I'm going to enjoy sharing some cultural anecdotes from schools with you. And the reason I've decided to do that is because I think teachers really like stories as a way to communicate and understand people. We work with a lot of young people and colleagues in our daily lives, and the way that a great way to understand that is through storytelling, and that just gives you some of the depth behind why people do things. So multicultural and intercultural learning. So a bit of research has gone into putting this little chart together for you, and it's an international research that I've done. I've written journal articles. I've been to international conferences. I have a lot of background in this area, and so that's what I'm basing these ideas on. Is just being widely read and talking to a lot of people all around the world about these ideas. So I'm aware that the idea of multicultural has evolved over time. Multiculturalism did begin in America some decades ago. Since then, the idea has spread around the world, and also possibly the meaning has morphed and changed as the years have gone by, as tends to happen with language. So today's graph, I'm just basing on what people today are using in the education realm. So the way that we describe multicultural is that we live alongside each other, as you can see by this little diagram. That doesn't necessarily mean we interact, but we live alongside each other in harmony, and that's, can be a great thing. So not necessarily communicating though. Cross-cultural is the step up from there, the step forward, and that's where some boundaries are being reached across. You've had some people living alongside each other, possibly immigrants who've moved into an area or whatever, and they might begin to be separate, but as humans do, they begin to interact, which is a great thing. So some boundaries are being reached across. Intercultural is where we're headed now. And as you can see from the diagram to the right, what that is all about is there are communications going on in all directions, and there's a lot of information and things being shared between people. So there's comprehensive mutuality and equality, and let's see if I can say this word today, reciprocity as well. I've been reaching out to a lot of schools around Australia to help them with their intercultural understanding programs. It's in the Australian curriculum as a general capability, which means the importance that the Australian government is placing on this is it sits alongside maths and English, and then there's intercultural understanding. And I think there's 3 other areas as well. It's really, there's some importance placed on it. However, delivering the curriculum is difficult for some teachers because the resources are still being developed, and their idea of how to communicate this to students, and even what it is still new. So there's a lot of training and a lot of trying of new ideas to happen for it to eventuate. So I'd say that some people are managing the intercultural understanding, but I'd say a lot of people are still at the cross-cultural phase, just from observing what's going on. So to my anecdotes that I would like to share with you today. The first one comes from a primary school I worked at last year and 2 years prior to that. The second one comes from that same school, but from the perspective of something that happened in a school council meeting. And then the third one is from a New South Wales school. So New South Wales is a different state to Victoria. So it's still in Australia, but it's, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of kilometres away. It's a long way away. So this is a different school where I had a conversation with a teacher that I was helping with her resourcing about compulsory sharing and what she was doing there. I'll begin with the Bollywood music anecdote. So I always try to, when I'm teaching, include as much diverse music as possible, and I frame it with the objectives of what the skills are that we're learning about, usually practical skills about, okay, we can learn rhythms up to, these kinds of complexities, or we can remember about how to use dynamics, louds and softs and that kind of thing, or we can this, that, and the other. So, or we can play something in 2 parts or 5 parts or 6 parts, that kind of thing. So always my music classes are practical. They're really just talking about something. That there might be a little bit of talk to provide context, but the rest is about the playing. So with the Bollywood music, I'll quite often be playing a track and we'll be listening for particular things, or having a game that's helping us to understand beat and rhythm or that kind of thing. And it's one of those cultures I come back to because kids just love the syncopated rhythms in Bollywood and the bright theatrical costumes that people wear when they perform that sort of music, and they're interested in it. I had a student who was Indian in a Year 4 class called Mishti, and I noticed that when I was playing the Bollywood music, I'd probably use it, 4 or 5 times in a 20-week semester. That each time she just wasn't that keen on it, while everyone else seemed to be really enjoying it. So I thought, I should check in with Mishti and just see what's going on there, because, I'd just like to know why she doesn't seem to be enjoying that kind of music much when she enjoys everything else. Because I was worried there might be something going on at home, So one day I was on yard duty and Mishti came past and we had a little conversation. And when I asked her about the Bollywood music mystery, she said, Nisha, every day I go home, my mum is in the front room with the door closed playing Bollywood movies, and I just hate it. I really, really hate it. I said, oh, okay. Thanks, Mishti. Thanks for sharing. So I'd sort of had all these assumptions about why she might not be liking it, and it was just something like that, and it was actually quite funny. But yeah, I henceforth didn't sort of, maybe pulled back a little bit on the Bollywood music, and maybe went for some other kinds of music as well, a little bit more. The school council story was in the same school. So I was on school council for 2 years, and what that is it's a group of parents and teachers and leadership in the school who meet regularly to basically run the school. We run the fundraisers. We, talk about any policies that need updating, that kind of thing. So we were sitting and just talking about all sorts of things, and then the next thing on the agenda the principal raised was that she would like more people of more diverse backgrounds that reflect the community on school council, and how could we enable this to happen, which I thought was a great thing for her to bring up. But the only solution that everyone came up with was that perhaps we should put something in the newsletter. Now, I waited for someone else to sort of object, and nobody did. So I made the point that perhaps putting something in the newsletter is not the most effective form of communication with people from diverse backgrounds, because a lot of them would be having English as a second language and perhaps not be able to read it even though they can speak it. there was silence. And then I noticed the week later, they put something in the newsletter reaching out to people. So that was disappointing. My other anecdote about culture comes from a New South Wales school. As I said, a teacher that I was helping out with resourcing, and when she'd selected the lesson plans she wanted me to send through, I said, "Oh, what are you doing in your classroom?" And she said, "Oh, I'm really excited. I've got my year sixes and we are doing a unit of work where everyone shares from their background." And I said, "Oh, how is that manifesting? What are you putting in place to make this happen? What sorts of resourcing are you doing to make this happen?" Very exciting. And she said, "I've just sent a letter home to every single parent asking that students bring something from home to share about their culture." Um, Now, that might seem pretty good because it does reach out to a lot of different people. It does assume that they all have their own traditions and experiences. But I thought some people would be more comfortable to share about their culture than others, particularly with students. Migrant students, for example, when they first come, are more concerned usually with fitting in and learning the culture here than sharing all about themselves, and they only tend to do that when they've been in the country for some months, unless they're, a particularly confident child, and sometimes they share straight away, which is wonderful and encouraged. But I think it's really important when you're talking about cultural experiences and sharing with the community to make it a voluntary thing rather than compulsory thing. So while we're talking about sensitivity and things like that, I thought I would just play you a little video as a topical consideration point, I guess. And to sum up what I was talking about with the previous anecdotes, I think you should provide opportunities for students to voluntarily share their culture, of course. That's really important. But please avoid everyone must bring a letter to parents asking for everyone to do a certain thing, because you need to be a little bit sensitive about the needs of the students and what they would like to do. I think it's good to choose culturally diverse repertoire for listening, singing, and playing, and always provide context. So a live presentation is the best if you can get some performers to come to the school, or if you can create an excursion, meeting a person from the background, that kind of thing is really good. I have a video that I'd like you to watch and think about the kinds of things we've been discussing and sensitivity. And there is something missing from this video, and I wanted to see if you could think about what that might be. So I'll play it for you and see what you think.
For this group, the importance is that it brings their culture to a place that hasn't seen it before. They've got this ancient tradition in their hands and in their instruments, in their voices, and it's great for the rest of Australia to see the hidden treasures we have in our communities. It's really important for regional people to see the diverse cultures we have in our cities. It's about maintaining their culture through language. And if they don't do that, it's lost. So for them, it's very important to teach their kids their language via song. Like these song cycles that we're playing are 1,000 years old. Now's our chance to pass it on to the Australians and to their own children as well. I'm working with these communities because it's showcasing the wonderful diversity, and it needs to be celebrated. And they've got this culture that's been alive for 1,000 years, and let's share it. Let's make it part of us.
So some wonderful music being played there, and some really interesting dancing and costume and culture. The thing that I think is missing is any kind of respect actually paid really to the musicians. You can speak about it and how great you think it is, but why are you speaking on behalf of the people who are right there? So the person presenting had his name as part of the video, but I had to go to the bottom of the YouTube video to find the credits for who was actually playing and what they were doing. And even then, I only got one man's name and not all the rest of the people in the video. So the people who were playing were directed musically by Mukham Rak Richard Petrovic, Petkovic. The people from the government who were presenting them were the Cultural Arts Collective, and that man who was speaking on behalf of those people. So I think it would be more culturally responsive to actually introduce those people by name and get them to speak about their culture, or get a translator to speak on their behalf and explain what culture it is. I have no idea still, and what language they speak, and all those kinds of things. So that would be the authentic and the respectful way to go about that kind of a promotion, I think. So I'd like to now go to Sound Infusion, which is an online arranging platform. And the first thing we will see is this map of wonderful instruments. It has a lot of samples and from 100 countries, and lesson plans for years 1 to 10. And it won a national competition and was used for the Australian National Music Countersin composition competition. Try saying that 10 times fast. So that means that I am going to just do a little summary about Sound Infusion and then go to the website, and I will share that with you. First though, this is a 1-minute demonstration video to give you an overview.
From the drums of Africa to the bouzoukis of Greece, amazing flutes, zithers and gongs from China, and didgeridoos in Australia. With Sound Infusion, students can create music and authentic sounds from around the globe.
I think you'll agree that's a pretty interesting video. So for my demonstration today, I'm going to show you a map, some lesson plans, a little treasure hunt that we're going to go on, another anecdote about a different student that was sparked while we were using Sound Infusion last year. And I'll first probably start with the classifications, because they're different from our Western classifications of, say, percussion, brass, etc. We decided to use these ones because they give a lot more detail about the way that instruments make their sound, and that seemed appropriate given the diversity of instruments that we had to deal with. So I'm now going to unshare what we're doing here, and so that I can share to our website, and I'll do that now. And we will go here. We'll need to do the share screen with the sound, which is good. And there we have it. So here is the interactive map that I was saying that we were going to start with. And I will start, before we examine this map, let's go to have a look at those instrument classifications that I was talking about. They're in the How to Use menu. So we have one of those for the interactive map and also for the studio with a lot of information. But as you can see, all the instrument types that we're talking about are described here. So we have a membranophone, and that'll be part of our first activity on Sound Infusion, which is a little treasure hunt. So it produces its sound by vibrating a stretched membrane. A membrane is a very thin piece of material which covers the opening of an object. Most membranophones are drums. Then you have your idiophones, and there are two types of those. The instrument in which sound is created through the vibration of the instrument itself. Aerophones, which are caused by vibrating air, so that's easy to remember. Electrophones is a type of music in which the sound is either produced by an electronic means or is produced and then electronically amplified. And chordophones, which is vibrating strings on instruments, but there are different types there as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of detail in these classifications, so that's why we chose them. So let's now go back to the map. Seems my internet has momentarily dropped out, so what I will do is I will go back to the dashboard and hope that that's working now. There we go. So this is the interactive map that I was talking about. And what I wanted to show you on the map today is how it could be used for a treasure hunt lesson plan. Then I'll show you where the lesson plan resides on Sound Infusion as well. So back last year, when we were in the midst of a long lockdown in winter, it was our second winter lockdown. I had at least 15 students turn up to a Year 4 class online, which was really great because there had been some problems with students just not going to any classes because, you know, this was in the two winters of 2020, 2021, we'd had months of lockdown. And when it happened in the second year, people were just a little bit over it. And, you know, it was getting towards the 8th month that we had spent. I mean, it was broken up, but, you know, the first time it was 4 months, and this was like another 4 months that we were locked into our homes. And so it was hard to motivate students. But when I said we were using Sound Infusion, they'd seen it before at school and were very excited, and lots of them turned up, which was great. So it was a Year 4 class, and we decided to do this treasure hunt. So at the start of the treasure hunt, I said to them, make sure you've got a pencil and paper, and we'll just write down what we find together. But we are basically going to find some instruments in certain categories that we're then going to go and make a little arrangement of in the studio. So I said, first, everyone, I'd like you to look for 2 membranophones. And we talked about what that was. And they decided first that they'd like to go to this little picture here, which I'll click on, because these dunduns, we have some identical looking ones from Africa in our classroom, and they love them so much. So they wanted to see what they sound like on Sound Infusion. So although the dundun is in Tanzania, it's also used in Senegal, Gambia, Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and the Ivory Coast. So there's lots of different ways that people play them in all of those different countries. And this is a great opportunity to, of course, teach the students about Africa having countries. Sometimes the way that I hear students talk about Africa, it's almost as if it's a country and not a continent. And they're quite surprised when I mention how many countries there are. So let's listen to the dundun from Tanzania. There is our first membranophone that we found. A bit of information there for context, a lovely illustration, and the sound of it, which is great. And then they said that they found another membranophone in a neighboring country right here. And this is one we didn't have at school. This is, the common name for it is the talking drum, because the strings, when they're tightened, and usually I think that's under the arm, so you can see like the thinner part in the middle, that's probably placed under the arm with the other bits facing either side of the person. And they use this little stick to play it with, but when it's tightened, when the strings are tightened, you get a higher pitch, and when they're loosened, you get a lower pitch. So it makes an interesting sound. So this is another membranophone, this time from the Congo. And and it's usually played in an ensemble with 2 or 3 other drums and occasionally a shaker and a bell, that one. So we'd found 2 membranophones, and they ended up being in neighbouring countries, which is interesting. Then I said, I'd like you to have a look for some chordophones, please. And so they were interested still to stay in Africa, in the continent. So we went way, way up north here and found the kora from Mali, which is in North Africa. Let's have a listen. Amazing sound, isn't it? And then we zoomed out again. And I said, okay, we need another chordophone, please, just to sort of keep our treasure hunt going. They said, oh, let's go to Egypt. And we found the Sazisaurus from Egypt. So that's also known as a tambourus, and you can see it's got a really long, thin neck there. It's a little bit like the one that was being played in the video we watched earlier. It's of Byzantine origin and has existed since at least the 10th century. And it was famous in Assyria and Egypt. And it may have had from 2 to 6 strings, so it may have changed. But now it has 6 strings. Interesting. So we had a look at 2 membranophones and we had a look at 2 chordophones. There were some other parts of the treasure hunt, but I'm going to skip forward to the end, which is where we're coming to my little anecdote. So I said to the students, now that we've sort of found things in certain categories, if you were going to look at the map of the world that we're looking at the moment, that area, and look at all the different pictures, what would be one that was a really unusual looking one that you would really like to find out more about? And overwhelmingly, they said this little curling one. They wanted to have a look at this. Now, we have sounds for this in the studio, but for now, let's just have a look and a read. So it's traditionally used in Jewish religious ceremonies such as the signaling of the end of Yom Kippur, the holiest day for Jews, and also played in synagogues. Made from a ram's horn, the shofar comes in many different shapes and sizes depending upon the animal used, and like the bugle, requires the lip control to create different tones because it doesn't have valves, so it just has all of the sounds being made from the pressure of the lips and the breath. So that's interesting. And what was more interesting about that is that there was a little girl who was looking very, very excited, and she put her hand up. And this girl often contributed to class discussions and was very confident. And I really liked hearing from her because she's quite smart, but sometimes not the most popular person because some of the students, I think, just got sick of hearing from her. But I always can encourage involvement. So I just said to her, what would you like to tell us? And she said, I played the shofar last night. And I saw a few questioning looks from students, although they were too polite to say that they were doubting that. And she said, no, last night was the end of Yom Kippur, and I'm Jewish, and we play this instrument every year, and I know how to play it. And then she told us a bit more about this ceremony, about being Jewish, and this was all information that I hadn't learnt about this student in 2.5 years of teaching her every single week. And this is the kind of thing that the interactive map on Sound Infusion can encourage. I mean, students will see things there that spark discussion, and that discussion will be about culture and where things come from and all that sort of thing, and it's very valuable. So that was a great and wonderful thing that happened. So I'll show you where this lesson plan, this treasure hunt lesson plan came from. There are a whole bunch of them from year 1 to year 10. So if you have a look there, I was using this one here. As you can see, there is a curriculum format at the top, which does have an international baccalaureate element for international teachers. On that, though, I tend to find that It's really not a big worry about curriculum. I think teachers sometimes get a little bit too wrapped up in worrying about every single element of the curriculum being written into their program. To be honest, after my 20th year of teaching music, I didn't write curriculum programs anymore. I didn't need to. I'd been teaching for 20 years. I constantly update and refine what I'm doing, and I know what the skill sets are meant to be for the students, and I assess and report accordingly, and the students have skills, and it all happens because I'm a good teacher. When I was running World Beat Learning, I put together at the back of each little booklet of lesson plans with the CD a guide to, I think it was New Zealand, the UK, America, and Australia. And when I compared all of those curricula, they were pretty much the same. They all say the same thing. They all talk about the same kinds of skill sets. I don't think you need to worry a lot about the curriculum document as much as I think it's a lot more worthwhile to put your time into what you're going to teach the students and then lay over the curriculum over it, because you have much more idea of what you're doing than a document does. End of lecture. Sorry. It's one of my pet joys, is to sort of encourage people to teach rather than look at curriculum documents. So each of these, though, has an objectives, very simple objectives, teacher resources, which are usually just pen, paper, and Sound Infusion. And the activities are really simple. So as you can see here, if we were in the classroom, we would have arranged the class so they're sitting in groups of 3 to 4 with one computer to share, a pencil and a paper. And then they would log on to Sound Infusion. And during the musical treasure hunt, they would swap who's writing down discoveries and who is operating the computer each time. So something is found and written down so that they all get a chance to do a different task. Looking at the world map, we asked children to find one instrument from 2 neighbouring countries. So we found 2 membranophones from African countries today, 2 string or chordophone instruments, 2 instruments I'd never heard of, or we looked at one. And actually, we went to the end to the instrument that looks interesting. And then the groups would share their discoveries. Then they would click on, it says play SI, but it is the studio. And then groups search for the instruments they listed, click and drag them into the grid and move them around to make a composition. Ask them to leave some spaces so that each instrument can be heard alone as well as with others. Have each group name their composition. Have a class discussion about the composition guided by these questions. How did the group use space? Did the parts sound good? If not, why not? Were there any similarities between the instrument sounds from neighbouring countries? So it's just one lesson plan that you can find on Sound Infusion. Back to the dashboard now. I would like to show you a little bit more for the studio. So when we go to the studio, all the interesting stuff is on the right-hand side to begin with, because we haven't populated this area with any information yet, and that's why that is. And I'll show you how that happens. Across the top, we have the save functions and the locking function. So I like to, if you don't have the magnet on, you can play around a little bit with your timings. But if the magnet is clicked on, I find it quite convenient because it actually locks each sample to the bar lines that it sits naturally within. And you can drag and drop, but it'll go to the nearest bar line, which is great. The record function for recording your voice, and play functions, volume function. We're in the library right now. This is here, example projects. I'm going to play you an example project now, which is something that you've heard earlier in my presentation, and I wonder if you'll recognize it. This is the one I want. sure that you recognize that that one was from the video, the 1 minute Sound Infusion video that I showed you earlier. It's the soundtrack, which was done on Sound Infusion. Then we go to our save projects. I'm going to just play you something that I'd like to be unpacking a little bit in our next session, which is how my logic behind just the arrangement that I did here. So I'm going to play you, I think it's this one. Let me have a look. I've tried it a few different times. Yes, I think it's this. Now, this is deliberately simple because I wanted to show how even if you were doing something with, say, grade 2 to grade 4 students, that there would be a logic behind the spacing and the ways that sounds are selected and placed together. And I have like a little demonstration video that I've just done that unpacks that and how I put it together. But I'll just play it to you. And yeah, this is something that I'll show you a bit more about next time. So that's my little piece of music that I put together because I wanted to have a blended learning link to our next activity, which is about capoeira. So I shall now stop sharing this and go back to sharing my PowerPoint that I was sharing earlier. Going here, going to the PowerPoint, which I will have to forward through to get to the space we're up to. Which is this section. So we've just seen how we can select sounds, well, how we can put together a little Brazil piece of music using sounds from Sound Infusion. Next time I will show you more about how you select and drag sounds and how they go in. That'll be part of the next session. However, today we're going to have a bit of a look at the capoeira slide that I prepared, which is inspired by a whole lesson plan that I've written around capoeira that has links to these videos and that kind of thing. And like I said, I'm quite happy to share all of the lesson plans that I discussed today with you so that you yourself can go and use them, hopefully as a starting point of a whole unit of work so that there's a bit of depth there. So Portuguese Capoeira, the group that's going to be featured in the video that we watch is Abada Capoeira. And capoeira is martial arts disguised as dance that was originally developed by enslaved Africans in Brazil. In the lesson plan, I talk about in Portuguese being the national language of Brazil and provide a 1 to 10 in Portuguese with links to El Lingo, which has useful pronunciation guides. So I'll just play you this little, it's an introduction to capoeira. And I think it really sets the context for what it is. And I would follow this up in the lesson plan with actually another demonstration video showing how to do some capoeira. That's actually a lot simpler than this. It's more of a beginner's take, but this is some experts here in Brazil.
The culture Brazil has to offer, from soccer to samba.
And of course, something we call capoeira. Slaves invented it as a way to disguise a fight with a dance.
It's evolved into a beautiful and soulful art form that is caught on all over the world. I know Ricky Martin does it for exercise.
Yes.
I've seen him doing it. The Olympic Zone's contributor, Dallin Cuff, tried it for himself. Take a look.
You can see the soul of Brazil in their eyes and faces. They practice one of Brazil's most celebrated cultural pastimes, capoeira, a source of pride and national heritage. At first look, it's a mixture of martial arts and dance and music, but it's so much more. José Tadeo Carneiro Cardoso, better known as Master Camisa, is the president and founder of Abada Capoeira. He and his students, called capoeiristas, performed their art and showed us their heart. Master Camisa graciously welcomed me into the Hoda to teach me the basics, giving me a better understanding of the athleticism, strength, and grace this art form requires. Master Morcego is a student of Master Camisa, but also a high-ranking master in his own right.
Capoeira is it's everything. It's an art.
All right, now to introduce the Abara Capoeira School. Go ahead, take it away. They're right here in Rio. Go ahead, guys.